It's really interesting not even comparing, but just noticing that a number of people I've worked with recently, a lot of their symptoms that they're suffering every day, for instance, disturbed sleep, having problems with their stomach, feeling weight on their shoulders, feeling stressed, feeling frustrated. They're often blaming it on where they're working or family, and of course, all of that does combine and make it difficult for people. But often there's other stuff underneath it. And I worked with a lady recently who had all these things. Her stomach was giving her grief and was causing her to try new diets and all sorts of things to try and get around it. Her stomach always felt sick. She felt felt a lot of pain in her shoulders and up in her neck. She was suffering headaches. And she was losing confidence because there was stuff going on that she just didn't have an answer for. She wasn't quite sure what was going on. She had an idea that it went back to her past, and it was stuff that she'd been to various people about before, but it was still holding her back, and she was starting to really feel that she couldn't be even at work. She was blaming a lot of it on her work, but she knew that there was other stuff underneath. So as we worked through, the sorts of things that came up were the responsibilities that she was given as a young person. Now, when you have a sick parent and you're young and you become, just because of where you are chronologically in the family as the oldest one, at 5 or 6 you become the person that has to look after the younger ones. That's a hell of a responsibility. And of course there's going to be all sorts of things where you feel you're not doing enough, and why is it left up to you? Mum was unavailable because she was very ill. Of course Dad was out working. So this young person, this woman as a young person, had a lot of responsibility, trying to find food and trying to get everybody off to school, or trying to look after the little ones, getting them to sleep and all that sort of thing. And with that came the guilt that she didn't feel that she did it well enough, that it just carried on over into her adulthood. And 30 years later, she's still suffering the consequences of being that young person. And this isn't the first time I've spoken about this on here, but she's not the first person that's come up with it either. I've had several clients who are lacking confidence and being really hard on themselves in their 40s, 50s and 60s. And when we go underneath and when we start to explore it, what happens is that they feel like they realise that a lot of it was the responsibility that they had as a young person through no fault of anybody. Nobody's saying it was bad parenting or anything like that. Of course, in some cases it is, it's neglect. But the ladies I've worked with, it hasn't been neglect on purpose. It has been just the way things were. There was nobody else around. They had no relatives that were close to help out when one of the parents became ill. And life-threatening illness, where mum was in and out of hospital, and the young person ended up being the one that was responsible and blaming herself, like up until now, up until we recently worked together, saying, it wasn't my fault, I'm not responsible, I shouldn't have been made responsible at that very young age, I shouldn't have had to deal with that, I had no childhood, I did so much adult stuff as a young person, and so therefore my childhood I didn't experience a childhood as a lot of other children did. And so from that, a lot of that was being held in her stomach, in her shoulders, in her neck. And once she started to come to her own conclusions, she realised that she didn't have to carry that anymore, and she didn't need to add it on to the work that she was doing now, because she felt that she had to solve everybody's problems. She felt that she had to be the one responsible for everybody, even if they weren't pulling their weight. in her current situation, in her current job, and a lot of times she would take on 2, 3, 4 times the amount of work. And it wasn't her responsibility to do that. She was still carrying on what that young child was doing when her mum was so ill as a young person. And so coming to those conclusions really, really helped. And as she processed over the following days and weeks, and I recently had a discussion with her and said, how is it going? And she said that the first few days after we'd worked together, there was anger. And, anger about why was she put in that position as a kid. And then processing it through to it was nobody's fault, it was just circumstances. And that she didn't need to do it. She didn't need to take on other people's responsibilities at the age she's at. And especially in the job she's in, it's a big job. And taking on everybody else's responsibilities is just, you can't sustain it. She can't sustain it, and she knows that now. And so therefore the stomach began to feel better. She felt that she was holding a lot of that in her stomach, and once that was released, her stomach began to respond. The feeling of weight on her shoulders lifted. I hear that a lot, where people feel that their shoulders are heavy and it goes into their neck and into their head. She felt that the shoulders releasing. She really felt that the lightness and the tension in her neck dissipated. And therefore she's able to approach a job. She was really thinking about leaving, but because she's been able to do her own processing and understanding where all this was coming from, she feels that she can do the job that she's in now and let other people take responsibility for what they're not doing. It's not up to her. She can offer, she can give them the paperwork, she can give them opportunities. And if people don't take that up, if they miss appointments, if they miss deadlines, that's not her issue. And that's what was holding her back before. She was feeling that I have to do this for everybody. And of course she doesn't. So it's interesting that it seems to be a common, there's common ground there. I'm hearing this a lot, especially with women around my age or 10, 20 years younger. The responsibilities that they're carrying from their childhood right through, and unless it's cut off at the knees, unless it's investigated, unless they have the chance or take the opportunity to pursue it and see what is underlying it, then they continue to feel those pressures, and they take those pressures into their relationships, into their work, into their everyday life, and it doesn't go away until they understand it.